And there is no cut the dang music. What's up, everybody? What's up? Happy Saturday. Hope you guys had a great week. I hope whoever you guys wanted to win the Super Bowl won. None of my teams made it. You know, the Eagles were out. The Steelers were out. So I kind of was a front runner and was like, yeah, it's going to be the Seahawks. They're just a fucking incredible team. They are an incredible team. And they did it. And they shut those boys down hardcore. I didn't think the Patriots had a chance. It just didn't feel like the Patriots were going to come and win another Super Bowl. I don't think that they were that team this year. I just didn't think so. All right, let's talk about a couple things. So, as I described on the channel earlier this week, we are doing 30% off coaching. All right, so that is for the weekend. The code is on the screen. It's 30 now. 30% off the 3 and 6 month coaching packages. Listen, if you're having trouble dialing in the sexual part of TRT, that is what I do. We will get it resolved. I give credence to the expertise of a lot of other folks, but people aren't focusing exclusively on sexual function like I am. And I just know it works. Man, I just know how to engineer protocols that work, that are tailored to people. 30% off right now, livecortex.com. Digital products are 20% off. Code for that is down below. All the codes are down in the description of this video. Brothers. My brothers in test. How has your life been? How's it been? Let's talk about Cialis for a second before we continue. Yeah, look, I think that 5 milligrams a day is a pretty healthy thing. It is healthier if you have elevated blood pressure on TRT, which some people have. But it adds a rigidness to erections that are nice. That is nice, despite being dialed in. You shouldn't need it if you're fully dialed in. You know, you should have ragers at night. And, most times a week, you should have great libido and great erection quality if you're dialed in on a hormone protocol, and you shouldn't need Cialis for that. 2.5 to 5, extra bonus, whatever. The only time that it seems to be a difference maker, you're going to see people in the forums like, I'm on TRT and here's my protocol and here are my numbers, but erection quality's not great. And then guy goes in the comments like, just try 5 milligrams Cialis, solve the problem for me. That's when estrogen is too high. Yeah, it could be at 37, and that's just too high for you for rigid erections. It's kind of a weird dance. It's like we need the estrogen for the libido side. Yeah, and if it drops too low, you're going to start losing that. Same thing with sensation. But it gets too high and it starts messing with erectile quality. That's why we have to be in a narrow band. 25 to 34, that's a great place to be. So you shouldn't need Cialis on TRT. You shouldn't need any erectogenic drug to get an erection. Something is wrong if you need an erectogenic drug to get an erection. All right, let's get the questions right away, boys. Let's just start this thing off. Trying to get through February over here. Get to March, then we're on third base for spring. If taking T shots every other day, as well as our Arimidex every other day, would it be a good idea to take my Arimidex same day as the T shots or 24 hours later? I am a fan of doing it 24 hours later. It is the way that you run less of a risk of crushing serum estradiol, and that may take time. With Arimidex, 5-6 days, you'll be back to normal if you crush it. But that's going to be a pretty grueling time. Yeah, crush estrogen is such a fucked up feeling state, man. It just feels terrible. You're depressed, your dick doesn't work, your libido has left your body. Things can be really great in your life, but you feel doom and gloom. It's pretty bad. So I suggest waiting a day. I think most TRT experts worth their weight in salt also suggest that. Think like Rand McClain, among others. And I think that you need to give the estradiol after your injection some time to peak. Some time to start to convert and for you to build some estradiol. If you take it right away, you're blocking everything. Now, if you're at 55 estradiol, then that might be a good idea, but you generally want to dial in a protocol where you don't have to, take an AI the day of your injection. If you can work it, and if the energy dynamics, acne, anabolism work for you with 1 shot a week, you do your 1 shot a week, you do some HCG every 3rd day or something, and you run your Arimidex day after. Hey guys, happy Sabbath. I'm not sure exactly what that is, but happy Sabbath, everyone. I lost the chat, or at least it's freezing, so we'll fix that in a segundo here. There we go. In which situations is Arimidex better than Aromasin? For example, Arimidex pair better with testosterone propionate. Yeah, I mean, generally, Aromasin takes a little longer to dial in because the effect duration window is longer, and the effect at reducing estradiol is more modest. So, if you can get the dose right away, sure, you'll be golden, but dialing in an AI can take like 2 months, because we put ourselves through the pain of making it take longer because we make adjustments too quickly. You should only make an adjustment on an aromatase inhibitor every 7 days, and that should be based on the informed position of your bloods, as well as a deep analysis of your symptoms, knowing what elevated estrogen versus, lower end estrogen actually feels like and what the characteristics are of the penis and your libido and your sensation and stuff like that, so that you can decide how to properly dial in. In the situations in which 8X is better than Aromasin is you don't want to wait. At day 5 or 6, you're going to be pretty much back to where you were before you took the Arimidex. Keep in mind that just because it's a half-life of 48 hours or 50 hours does not mean that you won't be blocking aromatase enzymes at hour 72. You still will be, just at a less percentage. So, Arimidex is better in that regard, but if you're concerned about the way that your lipids look, if they're in a bad place already, then Aromasin's better. It's just easier on your HDL, LDL, etc. And you want those in a good place. I recently looked at lipids and LDL. I think it's at 78. Or 70, was it? It's in a really good fucking place. I don't take aromatase inhibitors right now. I just don't need to. And that's my take on that. Brother, raw honey jar. Love that. Says, why did you recently stop recommending DHT cream in favor of scrotal testosterone cream? I didn't. I'm enjoying my SIP prop mast protocol, but want to boost DHT a bit to deal with some gyno I had. Yeah, DHT will certainly help. I mean, I would try transdermal DHT on the gyno. That's what I would do. That's what the literature shows us really clearly that works. And it would work. It would work. But I didn't ever recommend DHT cream. Number one, it was always a transdermal DHT gel. It's really an oil base. And these are two different things. You've certainly got my recommendations confused. DHT gel is useful in many contexts. You're on sports TRT. You don't really want to take an AI, so you'd rather have some DHT kind of counterbalance a lot of that estrogen, and you move the lever to the point where you have satisfactory erection quality. Like I was able to do that on cycle with DHT and with an AI eventually. Not cycle, sports TRT. Adding a drop, assuming a drop is a milligram of DHT to the scrotum every day or every other day in the context of a long ester where you've got to dose it at 100 milligrams a week to get estrogen at 25, where you need to be, but you're not making enough DHT. That's where that makes a lot of sense. At the same time, experimentally just kind of using it. You know, for me, no matter how dialed in I am, if I use a little bit of DHT, it turns up my libido to be like a grade higher in the animalistic sense. Like it's just aggressive. That's what DHT does. If I were you, if you're trying to boost DHT, yeah, I would just put transdermal DHT on because you're getting enough DHT from that other stuff. But I would just put it directly on your, the breast tissue. Good length and dosing for first cerebral license cycle. I think I ran cerebral license for 20 days and I forget the dosing. It was like 2.5 or 3 years ago. So it has slipped my brain. Other things have taken its place. What causes some men to have insomnia on more frequent injections, provided total T and free T is not super high? Yeah, the simple answer to that is you're not equipped to have steady state androgens. That's just it. Yeah, that's just it. You're not. Anyone that tells you that steady state is where you should shoot for is repeating gospel that, number one, is really not based in scientific reality, and number two, if you look at enough people over time, tends to cause side effects, elevated hematocrit, and generally doesn't work. Right? Then you get into these places where you're accumulating estradiol because you never get a trough. A trough is important, man. We have as natties like 200 to 500 nanogram per deciliter swings in testosterone throughout the day. We peak in the morning, and then we start troughing later on in the day, and our shit can shift 400 nanograms per deciliter. You know why the human body, the male body, does that naturally, innately, in its regulatory fashion, its regulated fashion? One of the reasons is, in order to maintain sexual function, you have to have a ratio of DHT to estradiol that is favorable. You can't just keep aromatizing, because then it's going to feminize you, right? Let me make this statement for folks to understand. ED on TRT is the feminization of the man. Yep, that's what it is. It's estrogen driven. Most of the time. I mean, you can crush estrogen and have ED, and you can also have way too much DHT and have ED. You could have testicles that don't work right because you're not dosing HCG, and you could have ED. But generally, if it's regarding estradiol, your ED on TRT from listening to the estrogen crusaders is fucking feminization. That's what it is. If you do a sex change, right? If you're going to transition to becoming a woman, guess what they give you? Estrogen. ED on TRT is feminization. It's literally feminization of the penis. It's feminization of the brain. Nothing good about it, brothers. When is it better to take Cialis? I would suggest taking it in the evening if I were you. Look, it's got a pretty long half-life. You really don't need to necessarily dose it every day. It depends on how much it's helping you and how much you may need it based on what your protocol is. But I would take it in the evening. Yeah, especially if it makes you feel a little wacky. Then at least you can just go to bed and work through those nasal congestion symptoms or, lower back pain symptoms that people get like initially with Cialis, and then you're fine thereafter. I also think it's best to facilitate nocturnal erection, so you want to take it at night. I mean, that just keeps the health of the penis in check, and that's what you want. There's studies on this, and taking Viagra basically at night fosters nocturnal erections, helps ED over time. So that's what I would say. Dangerwood says, you cured my PSSD 6 years ago with St. John's wort, 0.3% hypericin. Just want to say thank you. Well, I'm glad that worked. I'm glad that worked. It's not my first line suggestion these days. It's certainly hormones. And it's generally rare for that to cure it. It induces windows. But it's probably just making you have, it's probably curing your hypopituitarism. It's essentially what it's doing. That's the basis for these problems. Now, of course, it gets more nuanced with PFS and PSSD. You convert way more to estradiol than you do DHT. But I'm glad, man. Good morning, brother. First time catching a live stream in a bit. What's up, Dar Fitness? Hope you're great, brother. Choose just one tendon, ligament, and muscle repair and strengthening. Anavar, lower GH. I would probably wager GH is probably better for repair. Hard to say. I think Anavar is my favorite anabolic in the world because, I've taken it. It works. It can cause side effects, and it's not great for your health, really, to continue taking it. But it is so fucking anti-catabolic and so pro-anabolic that it makes it, and you don't have to dose it high. You can dose 6 milligrams a day of Anavar and you will gain mass. Do that for 3 months. Your body will transform. It is pretty awesome. Pretty awesome. Any special considerations for low SHBG guys when dialing in total weekly dose of androgens, whether it's bioidentical T or things like Anavar or Proviron? What do you mean by low SHBG? Yeah, mine last check was like 9. I've had it as low as 8. No problems. People that, dose Proviron at 50 milligrams a day for 6 months running cycles have pretty bottomed out SHBG. Dick works fine, as long as they're controlling the estrogen. I'm one of those people that doesn't really see low sex hormone binding globulin as a huge problem until it gets below 5 and above 40, 50 area. That's where I think it's problematic. The DHEA brand that I use is Douglas Laboratories, and it's micronized DHEA in 10 milligram capsules per capsule. And I just take 2 of those in the morning. And I am strictly on 20 milligrams a day. You run the risk of over aromatizing if you take more than that and causing side effects like overstimulation and insomnia and stuff like that. Some people aren't going to be able to tolerate 20 just because for whatever stupid reason they are converting too much to estrogen because it can do that. TRT add-ons I find essential besides HG and DHEA? Nothing, right? Nothing, because those are the essentials in my opinion. Now, depending on your situation and how complex it is, yeah, DHT is the only really great add-on. I mean, look, Arimidex, Aromacin, Primabol, and Masteron or DHT itself, if you need to control estrogen, or in the case of DHT, if you need a little more DHT because you're on a low dose of cypionate, like 100 milligrams a week, and your estrogen's 28, but your DHT is like 45. Kind of lukewarm, right? You're missing the rigidness of the erections and things just aren't quite great. You boost the DHT up, fix that problem. But otherwise, just not a lot. I think you can make any ester work. And if you can't, just make pure cypionate work, you do a hybrid, right? Hybrids are really one of the best ways to kind of add something to a TRT protocol, but which isn't some, fancy ancillary. It's just a pump of cream every day on the scrotum, 100 milligram cream. Tried zinc for a few weeks, felt great for a bit, and started to feel like shit after about 2 months. Was using copper to balance, best long-term dose. What I think is it probably just crushed your estrogen, man. I don't know if you're on TRT or not. I don't remember. But zinc will absolutely positively do that. The internet stuff about it and its relation to copper, and you've got to take copper with it. I've never found that to be true over the years. I think, you ought to test your copper and prove, are you depleting it? Because you're probably not. But I can tell you that for me personally, too much zinc, like 50 milligrams on any dose of TRT, short of sports TRT or cycle, it ends up crushing estrogen for me eventually. It's pretty crazy. It's a powerful AI. It really is the only supplement that we can take, besides maybe chrysin, that does have aromatase inhibition properties to it. So something to think about that. Will testosterone propionate, of course, be available? Will DHT course be available on a future website? Yeah, there's a lot of courses that I still have to create. I'm in the middle of building what is going to be the playbook for men on TRT for every ester. And I don't know if I actually have the image, but I'm almost finished with it. It's just going to take some time because it's a complex, and I don't have it. I don't know where it went. And it's got a lot of protocols on it. Just a ton. So, and it's called Mastering Libido and Erections on TRT. It's the sexual function playbook, right? For every ester, this is what you do to dial in the sexual function. But it breaks down a lot of the science behind DHT, estradiol axis, what's wrong with TRT information on the internet. Like if you're having a hard time dialing in, that'll be your best product. And that'll be it's a few weeks away. I had to postpone launching it for a variety of reasons. Steady State sucks. Thanks for all the content and knowledge, brother. Thank you for the super chat, my man. Appreciate that, dude. Appreciate that, brother. I'll use that $5 to get more craisins. I've been eating a lot of craisins lately. Good morning, brother. Is it true in general to have high E2 over 40 if you inject daily low dose? Around 100 milligrams. Is it true in general to have higher E2? What you're saying is if you inject every day, is that going to accumulate estradiol? It depends on the dose, but at 100 milligrams a week, if you're injecting every day and you have a modest dose of HCG called 100 IU a day, you are over aromatizing. Yep. You're over aromatizing. At that dose, I'd be at like 10 or 12 estradiol, even with 100 IU of HCG. So it's not good. But if your total test is at like 1,000 on this, then you're not over aromatizing and you're just an over responder to cypionate. It's just actually working the way it's supposed to work for you, or it's working very powerfully. Yeah. The 10 test prop a day with 2 clicks of 10% was money. Thank you. Okay, great. Hey, that's a great hybrid. Hybrid fast esters. We haven't done a deep dive on that. That's also really fucking good. I've done one video on it in the last month or so. Little bit of prop a day, pump or two of cream. You can dial that in. It's easier and takes shorter time to dial in, than cypionate. God. Brother, any specific reason you're taking DHEA? Yeah, conversion to DHT in the penis also has its own pro-erectogenic properties. And I want DHEA to convert to its ensuing or subsequent 7 neurosteroids, because neurosteroids are critically important, not just for your well-being and mood, but for libido. Why use cypionate instead of prop alongside the cream in the protocol? Because, so just to clarify for everyone, I'm running 5 clicks of 100 milligram cream a day. It's 25 milligrams per click, so it's 125 a day. 3 on the forearm, 2 on the scrotum. I alternatively switch to 4 on the forearm, 1 on the scrotum, maybe once or twice a week. And I infuse every week, every 7 days, a 40 milligram dose of testosterone cypionate on there. Number 1, it gives me extra anabolism without taking estrogen over range, so that's useful. Number 2, though, with just the cream, if I just did that consistently, there would be a point at which the libido and the sensation would drop, because estrogen on just 5 clicks of cream with 166 IU of HCG a day will continually trend downward. That's essentially why. Now, so I infuse extracipionate. The estrogen stays right in my fucking zone. Right. Well, I still peak and trough on, the cream, which just works for my body. Now, you could say, why not just add an extra pump of cream? Well, it's different. Pharmacokinetics are different. The stability of cypionate makes it so that on my protocol now, erections are good 7 days a week. Nocturnal is probably 5 days a week. But libido is good the whole time except for like day 6. It starts to drop off. Still interested, but it starts to drop. On the day 7 injection again, it's right on back. So it is... Compared to how dialed in people can get, I mean, it's fucking good. The sensation is crazy. The climaxes are intact. The libido is really strong, really, really strong, all the time. Not just like I'm with my girl and the libido is strong, but like I am. Aroused, my fucking libido is flaring when I'm trying to do work. So that's essentially why. Minimum labs you recommend and how often should they be done? Total test, DHT, estradiol sensitive, hematocrit, lipids. Yeah, you want to make sure everything is in the right place, and you don't want your lipids being in a bad place. A little bit elevated LDL, really not a problem, but you really want the HDL not to be low. And apolipoprotein B to be in range as well. Optimal dosing of HCG per month on average to protect particular function without spiking E2 too much. It's too general of a question, Chris. You've got to give me that in the context of a TRT protocol. 100 IU a day should be enough HCG to preserve testicular function and not spike E2. But again, it's in the context of the rest of your protocol. Yeah, you've got to have a protocol that's engineered not to make you over-aromatize anyway. SH, thanks for the super chat. Brother, Natty E239. TRT 150 milligrams a week, E249. Okay. Libido and EQ fades mid-sex. Right, okay. So I just explained this recently. I touched on it pretty thoroughly yesterday, but also during the video that describes high estrogen versus low estrogen. That's exactly what happens when estrogen is just too high for you. You'll have enough libido, so you can start the process. The brain side to start, and all the spinal cord firing interactions with the penis will fire, but you won't have enough of that, especially the dopamine side of libido, to maintain it because it's being blocked, essentially, is the non-scientific way to say it, by estradiol. So that's your problem there. Yeah, I mean, at this point, I just reduced that dose to 130 and you probably solve your problem 120 or so. But I don't know if you're using HCG or not. Yeah, unless 5 milligrams Cialis. That makes sense. 210 a week of test prop plus 25 milligrams a day of Anavar. Insane nocturnals, libido still down. EQ is what? And then extreme fatigue. Well, you could. I think you're having fatigue on that much androgens because it's kind of a cycle there, right? Not the 210 of test. That's just TRT and just sports TRT basically. But 25 of Anavar, I mean, think about it. That's 25 times 7. What is that? That's like fucking 200 additional milligrams. 175 additional milligrams on top of your 200, man. You're at 378, 380, fucking, that's cycle territory of androgens. And what you're probably experiencing is androgen-induced fatigue, which can happen whether it's test flu or some other thing. It's kind of hard to put a mechanism on. This happens to people. It happened to me on cycle. I'd made the jump right up to 560 a week. And I had test flu for 7 days. It was fucking horrific. I thought I had the flu. It was just test flu. Then I reduced the dose and I changed the ester to prop and reduced it to 490 a week. That stabilized. It took three weeks or so of doing that. It moved back up to 560 a week of anathate. This was 160 every other day, something like that. And then I was fine. I didn't have any problems. And I was able to, put on some keepable gains and stuff. Yeah, CAB is in the list. If I have DHEA of 416 blood, would you still recommend DHEA to all? Well, that's like relatively fine DHEA. I guess not. you know. Typically, folks don't have higher NDHEA on TRT, but you'll have to see, man. Experiment with it, have it in there, see if it helps erectile quality, see if it gives you more DHT because it has the ability to do that. And if it's problematic, just kill it. Yeah, usually low luteinizing hormone means lower end subsequent sex hormones because that's what builds it. Thanks for the super chat again, SH. Continued. Tried 0.25 milligrams or 0.125 milligrams of Arimidex. Feel great on day one. The fatigue, EQ, crash, strong aromatizer. Brother, you really needed to just put this all in one. Yeah, as I said, I mean, you're on too many androgens, I think, for now. I mean, you could push through that and that fatigue would go away, almost definitely. At the same time, maybe adenovirus taxing your liver, liver problems or like taxing the liver can cause fatigue. Definitely. It's one of the main symptoms of a sluggish liver. Just want to look at taking some Totka with it and see if that solves the problem. Yeah, libido is still down, probably because estrogen's too high on that ultimately. You feel great on day one and then EQ crash. So then you're crushing it just a little too much. What you probably need is, first of all, that's too high of a dose of Arimidex right here in that case, because you feel fine on day one. So you hit the zone on day one. Then you feel like shit because you blow right out of the zone. Yeah. Only way to fix this is reduce that prop dose to 140 a week or something like that. And where at peak and trough the estrogen stays close to range, preferably low on the trough, or you run Liquidex. You dissolve Arimidex in vodka and microdose it at like 0.001 milligrams every other day, and you're just oscillating out of the zone, right? You hit the zone and then you're out. That is the purgatory that a lot of folks experience. Most people that come to me for coaching, they've been dialed in at one point or another on every protocol, but it's fleeting. They've got the best erections and libido of their life for 3 days, and then then they have ED at day 4, right? Hormones switch. They're not in a tight enough band consistently. The protocol is not perfected. That's what I do. I have so much passion for perfect protocols because everyone has one. Might be different between people. The same principles apply. The perfect place. Fluctuations, right? E2 relatively stable. The right amount of DHT. That's what it's about. When would you switch from cypionate to enanthate or from Arimidex to Aromacin? From cyp to enanthate, again, there's not a huge difference. If you want a slightly better peak and a slightly lower trough, just switch to enanthate, and that might be useful for estrogen conversion. From Arimidex to Aromacin, if your lipids are skewed. Can we explain a little bit more about neurosteroid and its function of our well-being? Neurosteroids, especially the ones that come from DHEA, modulate the GABA-A receptor in a way which is pro-libido. So, I mean, neurosteroids also have a wide array of other properties. I mean, they influence your ability to maintain a water-salt balance in your body that is favorable, which is useful for athletes and people who work out. But at the same time, neurosteroids are like beefed up neurotransmitters. They're like a better version of neurotransmitters, man. They fucking, on the sex side, keep you masculine and keep you happy. On the brain side of things, and regarding GABA and stuff, if GABA doesn't fire all that correctly, you're gonna have anxiety disorders and panic, and you will not be a cool centered person. So pregnenolone, its upstream pathways are also useful for brain function and keeping calm and staying in the right place and optimizing the libido side of the brain. In your expert opinion, I need the best natural nootropic to help me with a long reading and comprehension. Bacopa, yeah, but you'd have to take that for weeks or months at a time to start really seeing results. Natural nootropic for that, you'd probably be looking at Citicoline. Dylan, thanks for the super chat. Brother, running 200 IU of HCG daily plus 70 IU 75 of FSH every other day for fertility. 26-year-old been cycling TRT for months. What do you mean cycling? Oh, cycling plus TRT. Okay. Want to start trying to conceive in May. Thoughts on a protocol? Testosterone is 30 milligrams a day. You can increase the dose of sperm is fine. Yeah, sure. I mean, if you're wanting to be on the cycle. Quite honestly, I know people that have gotten their wives pregnant with no HCG on TRT. Now, that's pretty rare, but it can happen. At the same time, 125, 130 IU HCG, more than likely going to do it. Now, if you've been taking steroids for a very long time, it's going to take you longer than that. You'd have to... Then you would want to go and watch Vigorous Steve's discussion about what his journey was. You know, he's a bodybuilder, so he's used a lot of anabolics over the years to become fertile enough to get his wife pregnant. But, you know, you're 26 years old, you've been cycling TRT, you're running HCG, I think you're going to be just fine. What does good nocturnals before EQ during the day signify? It signifies that you drop in estradiol at nighttime, and then during the day, you go over. That's one thing that it signifies. The second thing that it signifies is that you're too low estrogen, period, continuously. So you'll have nocturnals because DHT is driving them. That's what drives them. But then, you know, during the day, the estrogen maybe drops a little further. It's just not good for your estrogen state. It's just not good for arousal and therefore erection quality. But I would wager it's the former. Now, the estrogen drops in a reasonable place then, and you're DHT driven. And then you inject your protocol or whatever, and then it, you know, E2 goes over range. That is the lowest hanging fruit in a situation like that, right? Because obviously the mechanics of your erection work because it's happening spontaneously at nighttime. You know, lower end estrogen is always what drives nocturnals, by the way, with DHT being the heavy influence. But it's like if estrogen's too high, it'll block them. If you stop getting boners on TRT at night, it is likely just estrogen overpowering. They're not entirely necessary because you could be so close to that range, and then during the day you're horny and your shit works for penetrative sex. But that is the single biggest driver of that. Yeah, you can try 5 milligrams and just kind of run your blood and see where you're at. What nootropics are you currently taking? None. Daily stack is B complex, 4,000 IU vitamin D, 20 milligrams DHEA, about 2 grams of lecithin. And that's all. Yeah, I've scaled way back on nootropics. I take my torque stack every now and then for like just an extra boost. But dude, I feel like I'm 20, man. My energy is just solid all day long, dude. I mean, the cream in the morning, my test cream, is a nootropic in and of itself. That just makes me feel fucking great. At the same time, I don't drink a lot of alcohol, dude. You know, I have 2 beers at nighttime with my girl. You know, we might go out, have a drink. Like I never get even faded. I mean, that significantly reduces your quality of life. Right? You're going to trade the whole next day until 2 p.m. to feel normal for 2.5 hours of like GABA agonism. It's stupid. It's fucking stupid. Now, I like having a beer or 2, even high alcohol ones. But that's my limit, man. You know, so I don't do anything that, I just don't do anything that makes my energy shit. I'm asleep. Me and my girlfriend, my sweet, precious girlfriend, Jill. That's her. We are, look at those two. This was us in Florida last September. We're asleep by fucking 10:30 every night, dude. We're already in bed on our phones, you know, playing casino games or chatting about our day and plans. And if there's business of life that we've got to talk about, we're talking about that shit. But we're fucking asleep, dude. And we wake up at 7. You know, we wake up at between 7 and 7:30 every day, you know, every now and then, 6:45, 7 o'clock. So, and we eat, dude, 3 times a week. We're eating these big, colorful chicken salads. They're tonight is a salad night. They're fucking amazing. Now we have cheat nights eating pizza, but the rest of the nights it's, you know, chicken, rice, asparagus, a biscuit. We just treat ourselves well. So I'm getting around to saying I just don't need nootropics right now, you know. That's kind of where I'm at. I can have a total T of 700 and free T of 16, but DHT is always above 200 with E2 above 40. What's causing my T to strongly convert to downstream hormones? Well, so you have a lot of DHT. E2 is 40. Interesting. So it's converting to both in somewhat of an excessive manner. You might need to be at 600 total tests if you want to naturally get that E2 to 30. Yeah. What's causing that? Hard to say. You know, excessive aromatase activity, excessive 5-alpha reductase activity, which is usually not a problem, at least the latter there. Yeah. It's a tricky place to be because also the ester heavily drives this. This is the kind of shit, I mean, at least estrogen over range on a lower end total T usually comes with testosterone cypionate. That's why I'm not a fan of using it as your TRT, as strictly TRT. So you switch to cream or something, things will be different. You've talked about hurting libido, creatine hurting libido. I think the mechanism is agonism of the postsynaptic 5-HT1A serotonin receptor. That's what I think. In your experience in dialing in people's estrogen with Primo, most common ratio, there is no ratio, but what I see, you're running sports TRT in 300, 150. I see shit like that causing ED and libido problems. Now, there are people, mostly bodybuilders, who can tolerate it, who've been dosing the shit for a while, and they seem to respond differently to it, that are fine with that ratio there. But, I mean, at 300 tests, I would think something like 50 to 75 milligrams of Primo. I get all the outliers. Like, I get all the folks that take 0.125 milligrams of Arimidex and it crashes their estrogen, but it was at 50 prior. Over responders, people that are really sensitive to the fluctuations in estrogen. And, if you block it, which you will with Primobolan, you start getting low estrogen sides. So you're going to have to see. That might be a fine place to start. But if your libido goes south at day 1, day 2, you've taken it too low, bro. And you got to do my other suggestion of 300 milligrams of test and like 75 of Primo. I think micronized is better. I don't think you need dissolvable tablets of that stuff. Age 26 male. Feel great on TRT alone. No HCG. When I want to get my wife pregnant, can I just add HCG? Yeah, you can add it. Maybe it's going to increase the estradiol, so you might have to adjust your protocol, just kind of lower it a little bit or whatever. Lower the testosterone dose. But I don't think that... Yeah, I don't think it's a good idea to not take HCG. Can't lie to you. I have to just tell you that I don't think it's a great idea to not take it. I think you've got to, you got to keep those boys functional, man. The thing that really changed my view, well, first of all, I always known it was necessary because I've never been able to dial anyone in from a coaching perspective without HCG. I don't know anyone that's dialed in with sexual function without HCG. There's people that say they are, and I guess I believe them. I've just never seen it. But I read this big, long study on the atrophied testicles of steroid users. And though we're not talking about using steroids, using, just replacing testosterone, that study was fucking bad. I mean, they had like a complete shutoff of cellular mechanisms in the testicles. The shit was dead. And not just because they were dead, because they were actually dead when they were testing them. From all the steroids, man. Nice couple. Oh yeah, me and Jilly. That's my girl. Today's Valentine's Day too, so we're gonna do something special. How do you suggest controlling estrogen on cream when needing a higher dose due to high SHBG? Well, I wouldn't do the higher dose. I would take Proviron and get the SHBG down. I'm on Testy and my prolactin and estradiol are out of range. Total test is 2,300. Well, that's why. Yeah, you want to get that down to 900 if you can. Or, you take an AI. In many cases, aromatase inhibitors will also fix the prolactin problem. Yeah, this is what happens with estrogen. This is why I always fucking warn people about this. Estrogen blocks dopamine firing upstream from the pituitary. So that dopamine filters in an impaired fashion through the pituitary stalk to the pituitary. Now, what dopamine's job through the pituitary stalk, otherwise known as the infundibulum, is is to latch onto D2 receptors in that pituitary and inhibit these cells called lactotropes, which fire prolactin, secrete prolactin. So, estradiol at the same time desensitizes those dopamine D2 receptors on the pituitary from the signal of dopamine. It makes it so that when dopamine tries to agonize them, there's a lesser genetic effect. You need that upstream dopamine firing to filter through the pituitary stalk to powerfully and strongly agonize the dopamine D2 receptors on the pituitary gland to prevent prolactin from secreting out of range, right? This is why estrogen high, no matter what people tell you, is another problem. There are studies on rats where they give them synthetic estradiol. People will argue, well, it's a different kind of estradiol than ours. It's fucking estradiol. They give them enough estradiol, and guess what happens? They spontaneously produce prolactinomas, pituitary tumors, because that estrogen is blocking dopamine firing from the fucking brain. That's your problem, man. Do you recommend blood donation to help manage hematocrit? Yeah, if there's nothing else you can do, you could take low doses of naringin every day, but it tends to make other drugs work more potently, naringin, so you got to be careful with that. I would suggest trying to get your TRT protocol straight so that the hematocrit's not out of range. Mine right now is 50. Depending on the range, some ranges are 52. Above 52 is you have too much of it. Some people it's 50. You don't want it above 50 is what I would say. But I think you should drink more water and do cardio and try to fix that. Otherwise, you're going to have to modify your protocol. Blood donations are fine, and they will lower it. They will lower it for sure. But you run the risk of reducing serum ferritin a little too much, and then you're going to feel tired and fatigued and fucked up. Brother, is the 30% discount applicable for the Telegram one? No, it is not. No, if you need a 30% discount on that, brother, you need to look at what you're doing as an adult in your professional life. Also, just curious, why don't you take pregnenolone supplement? Because it converts too much to progesterone. I already make enough progesterone from HCG, and progesterone blocks 5-alpha reductase, and that causes ED. Yeah, if folks are curious, just go buy some bioidentical progesterone cream, and say you're pretty dialed in and your erections are good. Take it, and then you'll have ED, and then you'll know why I don't suggest people take pregnenolone on TRT. It's just not useful. Not useful, man. May be able to prevent some anxiety that is TRT induced, but there's just many ways to skin the cat, and you don't want to do something that can mess with erectile quality. Raw honey char. I have testosterone trough levels of 1,460 milligrams sip twice a week. Jesus Christ. Yes, that's an overresponder. I've switched to hybrid Ciprop, but not sure if I'd lower the total weekly dose. I would if I were you. Yeah. I mean, it's not entirely a bad thing because you could probably get away with 12 milligrams a day of cypionate, and that might actually get you to DHT at 60 and E2 at 30, which would be good. But yes, I would say that's a hyper responder for sure. Dude, at 210 a week of testosterone cypionate, my total testosterone levels were 1,200. Basically at peak. I was doing daily injections. At 60 milligrams twice a week, it's only 120. You're troughing at 1,400? What is in your vial, brother? It's not a bad thing. You're just going to have to lower everything, man. Yeah. Lower it until E2 falls in range and see if you have enough DHT and you're dialed in that way. Or keep that high test as long as it's not causing problems with your health or hematocrit or lipids, and dial in an AI or DHT derivative. Can I reconstitute HCG and then separate and freeze vials to delay degradation? Yes, you can. Split in 4-week size vials, pull one out and thaw one out at a time. Well, I would think that would be less efficient than just reconstituting it or constituting it when it's time to, open a new vial. You run more of a risk. Now, when it's freezing, what degree of degradation can happen considering microbes are the thing that denatures your HCG mostly? Probably not a whole lot, but it's inefficient. You're thinking you're being efficient by reconstituting 4 vials and putting them in the freezer and then just thawing them out. So you're going to do it all at once kind of thing. You still run the risk of already reconstitutive HCG just sitting there for weeks and weeks and weeks. Even though it's in the freezer, it's just not something I would do. How does Proviron lower SHBG? It binds directly to the sex hormone binding globulins in an antagonistic fashion is how. How do your views on pregnenolone supplementation differ from Dave Lee's? I think Dave has used pregnenolone with people who have overstimulation on TRT and have insomnia, therefore. But there's always a different, again, another way to skin the cat. There's a different reason for why that's happening. I mean, there's a different solution for that. Most folks push through that and then they're fine. In the beginning of TRT, for me, I had those problems, man. It'd be 11 o'clock at night and my body would be tired, but my brain would not be tired. And I would be like, I never have a hard time going to sleep my whole life. Then I had a hard time going to sleep. I could not fucking fall asleep. I'd shut my mind down via kind of like a walking meditation, just like a kind of meditating, just doing the transcendental or focusing on nothing and just I can shut it down, but I couldn't fall asleep. But then that passed. Then I ended up running a 560-week cycle and I slept great every night. So I think that's why, Dave typically tends to suggest that. But I just think there's another way to go about it. Maybe you're on too high of a dose and you won't get used to it. You need to change that. I just don't really love it. DHEA doesn't have many side effects, no, but DHEA can make you overconvert to estradiol. Now, people respond differently to different doses. 20 milligrams is a good start, but if you find yourself way over an E2 when otherwise before you had brought it in, E2 was in check with the same protocol, then you should remove it. Test cream, 25 milligrams every day. Thoughts? So 25 milligrams of test on the cream. It depends on the concentration, but no, that's way too low. That's way too low. Way too low. You're not, you wouldn't be doing much and you'd be risking shutting down. If you're a natty, you'd be risking shutting down, and for what? A minuscule amount of test. It's not a good idea, man. I run 125 milligrams a day of testosterone cream. It's different. It sounds crazy. It's not a cycle at all because it's different than Cypionate, which stays around. If I ran 125 a day of Cypionate, be on 800 milligrams of test. Yeah. But 125 milligrams a day of cream is just not a cycle at all. Because it troughs. You get a swift peak and then it starts going down. So you kind of stay relatively stable. Yeah. Smartest way to transition from cream to daily test E. Thanks for the super chat, bro. Why do you want to do that? I think that's a bad idea. You can dial it on cream, but you probably have the wrong concentration. You probably have the 200 shit, and they're telling you do it twice a day, and it doesn't make sense. You got to get 100 milligram cream and surgically dial it in. But if you're wanting to do this, you probably want to front load. You should go to Steroid Plotter and try to, if you're not taking an AI and you want to just get the estrogen in range, plot out what the daily dose is going to be to get you around 700, and it's probably going to be about 14 milligrams a day. And then you should plot out if you're bolusing like 100 milligrams every 3 days, how soon will that get your numbers to around steady state 700? And at that point, you switch to 14 milligrams a day. That would be the best way to do that. Yeah, I like to front load if I'm going on a long ester. Otherwise, I'm going to feel like dog shit for the first 4 weeks until it builds up. So I want to get that out of the way. I'd rather have like super high test side effects and just get caught up than go through feeling like dog shit in between. Peptides and how they fit into, well, HCG is a peptide. So that's one. Otherwise, not a whole lot. I mean, you get some extra anabolism with the growth hormone peptides, but you also got to be careful that you don't fuck with your blood sugar levels because they can via insulinogenic properties. And, quite honestly, I'm not a huge fan. I mean, there's PT141, which is basically making your hypothalamus pump out some more dopamine. That's all it does, by the way. So that's erectogenic and good for libido, but it's taken consistently. It loses its potency. So it's not really sustainable to be taken like every other day or something. I like BPC and TB500 for muscle repair and tendon repair, and should have definitely helped my soreness in areas using those peptides. Other than that, I'm not a huge peptide fan. Switch to Test P from Test E. And this is the best my body has functioned on TRT the last 2 years. Great. So hopefully you're one of those people that just prop solves everything, man. I mean, it does for a lot of folks. I went on a testosterone propionate tirade on YouTube because I did a lot of client work and people try and prop, and it was just so much easier to dial them in. And they had just their body. Some people's bodies just prefer fast acting testosterone, and they're never going to dial in on long acting testosterone. Yes, it does. Yes, it does. And thank you for your words here, man. That's what we're trying to do over here, bro. I care more about record. I'll be harder on people and be, gruelingly, like, I need your reporting. We need to go back and do labs, like, so that people are dialed in correctly in coaching context. You won't leave not dialed in unless you book too short of a time. That's what I care about the most, is people getting results. I'd rather have my record look good than anything else, than try to perpetuate some dogmatic idea because I want you to believe it. That estrogen is cardio beneficial and all this, you should have 50 of it, but it's really just this dogmatic idea that's new and shiny, so we think it's antithetical to what exists, so that looks new and shiny. Bullshit. Do what fucking works, man. Get out of your need to seem cool or seem unorthodox. It's fucking stupid. You want to be right. You want to be right. And that's what I care about on this channel. So when I see that it changes lives, I'm happy, man. Oh, cream to daily test E. I explained that to you by going on Steroid Plotter and finding where you end up going. What it's going to take to get to around 700 if you're not using an AI. I just explained that, man. Feels weird having full libido back, calm mood, full energy, and all the benefits I'm supposed to have the last 2 years. Oh, yeah, this was the guy that switched from enanthate to prop. Yeah, doesn't it? That's what it's supposed to be. That's how it's supposed to be on TRT. Dude, you can do it, man. Where you're just horny all the time, your junk is like thick and blood-filled and warm even when you're not aroused. The sensation is great, and you're like a young guy. You're like a young guy. That's all I do in coaching, by the way. It's just take people from where they are in this like rigmarole of trying to dial in and listen to all the bullshit on the web, and then turn them into young men sexually. That's all. Yeah, I've been over this, and it really depends. So Masteron versus Primo or versus Proviron to adjust estrogen. If you're on a low enough dose of test and the estrogen's like 37, you're still having like a little bit accordion dick problems, then Proviron is useful because it only lowers it a certain degree, not a lot. Masteron and Primo are for the more intense situations where you just don't want to go below 150, but the estrogen's 47 or something, and you need a little bit of Primo Bond to take that to 34, 32, 27. Or some Masteron to block the gene expression and block the receptors. And then your body, tissue-wise, feels like you have lower-end estradiol. So then you're dialed in that way. So it's like on higher-end doses, Primo and Masteron. On lower-end doses where estrogen's just a little bit above range, Proviron works better. So we got somebody talking about switching from 4-3 SIP to prop. So ratio SIP to prop. Oh, that's an interesting ratio. Total game changer. I just think, I just know that some people respond better to fast acting testosterone. Before cypionate and enanthate ever came to the market, you know what we used? Prop. We used prop, dude, for TRT. Before we made these long fucking chain esters. The PIP sucks, but if you're dialed in, you just tolerate it, man. Put it in a warm thing of water, like a bowl of water or a cup of warm water, and that usually helps. PIP isn't all that bad. Yeah, I mean, I've got sub-Q prop hurts. I had like just fucking burning in the tissues, and I didn't like that at all. Levi gets lumps when he injects prop and can't inject on that site for a week. 1-inch 24 gauge on glutes. You might try 5/8 inch insulin needles in the upper glute and see if that helps. Otherwise, try pinning the delt, see if that helps. Warm the vial, see if that helps. Put some aloe vera on your injection site or something like that. I don't know. It's tricky. It can sometimes just hurt the PIP, and you're walking around sore and shit. One time I injected prop. It was a pretty good bit. I think it was like 90 or 100 milligrams in my thigh, the vastus lateralis, and somehow it was maybe a little too low on that muscle, and some of it sort of leaked out into like my knee area, and I had a sore knee, a badly sore knee, for like 10 days. What do I think of TRT pellets? I know one person on it, and it is my doctor. I have three different doctors, mostly for bouncing shit back and forth, some to prescribe certain shit and whatever. And one of my docs is a telemedicine guy who is in his 70s, so late 60s, early 70s, and takes pellets, and his total T is like 2,500. This guy, and he looks like a rock. He's just healthy as fuck, but he takes Arimidex to control the estrogen. Otherwise, he's got dick problems. So that's the only person I know about on pellets. Otherwise, I don't think it's great. You can't control it all that much. You can't finely tune that protocol. You just can't. You just can't do that, brother. It ain't going to work, brethren. 30% off coaching, boys. Listen, if you're thinking about getting on board, it's all I do. My brain works in a fashion where, especially having accumulated a lot of information, a lot of real experience with this, also, though, I just know how to fashion protocols that work. People become experts in stuff. Yeah, there's the guy that's become he's the world's leading expert in conveyor belts. And you're sitting at a BMW factory where every hour you lose $200,000 if those conveyor belts are down, and one goes down. So now they're losing $200,000 an hour. They call the specialist. He comes in, looks around for about 2-3 minutes, pulls out one of those fucking 8-bit screwdrivers, the star looking ones, whatever they're called. Turns one screw to the left. Problem solved. Guy's like, what the fuck? How is it so? That's what it was? Yeah, I've been working on these machines. I built them. Been working on them for 20 years. Now they're not losing $200,000 an hour. That's the kind of expert you want managing your protocol. That's all I do. Book me livecortex.com. The code is on the screen and down below as well. 30% off 3 and 6 month packages, boys. For those of you that don't want the hand holding and the long coaching cycles, I totally understand. I mean, we can get great traction, if not solve your problem, in a singular call, plus me drafting 3 to 5 action routes for you on a protocol tracker on the web that you can go and execute, and giving you logic for how to adjust in between based on your situation from a fact-finding call. That's the sexual function blueprint consult. You can get that at livecortex.com. All the digital products are 20% off right now as well. Codes are down below, brother. A surgeon, precisely. All right, everybody, I'm going to end the stream. Much more content coming this week. As usual, we are fully back to content. Just January is a weird month. We got snowed in with a 1.5 feet of snow. There were power outages. There were problems. There were logistical issues. It was an ordeal. And then there's some other shit that happened that, I couldn't really create content. But now we're back in action. We're back action. This week, lots more to come. I'm going to be heading to Florida late March, but that's a while away. So just so you guys know, I don't think any of you care enough to know, like, hey, there won't be content like end of March for about 7 days. But after that, we hit the ground running as usual. I hope you guys enjoy the rest of your day and the rest of your weekend and do something cool. If you have a loved one or a lover, make sure you let them know how much you appreciate them today. It's an important day for that. And I'll talk to you boys this week. Peace.